Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be speaking at this event, which I believe is extremely critical at these times to be able to communicate not only with our stakeholders, the public and private sector, but also share what we see in the market, where we can find improvements and continue healthy business growth. In this particular, the slides that I put together today is really just to look at the triple P outlook. And the reason I would like to discuss this is because this is an area where we see growing significantly. And you'll see in the upcoming slides that this growth was not very much impacted as a result of the COVID situation. So what I'll be sharing is a few topics here, and that is basically looking at the GCC as a whole in terms of its financial health, how it looks as a result of this economic downturn, global electricity investments also on a global scale. And then I'll be focusing more towards the projects we see in KSA in Saudi Arabia. Again, what we are seeing on a global scale to compare, because I think it is a good benchmark to look at exactly what we can expect will take place in the kingdom. And then finally, a few success factors that I think are critical and important, high-level success factors related to triple P projects. And then finally, new challenges. What are the new challenges that we can expect to see? So having said that, a financial outlook in terms of the health status of the GCC countries, there's a few KPIs that I put on here: credit rating, debt to GDP ratio, foreign exchange reserves, oil and gas reserves. Where the arrow down button will show you where the credit rating was reduced in 2020 as a result of the COVID case. So in the case of Saudi Arabia, it was reduced to A1 negative, no change impact to the UAE and Qatar. Kuwait was reduced to AA1 and so on and so forth. This can be compared to the chart you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So in general, the majority of the GCC countries are either within the upper medium grade level of credit rating. Debt to GDP ratios, also the majority of the countries are still very healthy, so still a lot of room to acquire debt to improve the economy and continue to support businesses in the country. Foreign exchange reserves, again, very strong on a global scale. Oil and gas reserves, same status. So in general, a fairly healthy economic status of the GCC countries in the region. If we look at global electricity outlook in terms of investments, this was done by the IEA, a recent report by the IEA, and you can see that in general, the total investments in the energy sector were reduced on a global scale by 20%, which is quite significant in 2020. If we look at also on a global scale, focus towards the electricity sector, that impact was by 10%. So again, strong numbers. But let us now look at a particular, or in particular, to what's happening in Saudi Arabia specifically. What we're really seeing take place is in the utility infrastructure projects is actually an increase. So as a result of the vision that took place, the beginning years, I can say, was mainly strategizing and preparing for the future. But now we are seeing projects moving forward to bring that vision into realization. And you can see it's not a linear increase, it's actually a significant increase from year to year. So in 2020, the release of projects or awards were 11 in the utility infrastructure. So again, the complete opposite of what we're seeing on a global scale. So very healthy project movement in the utility infrastructure project. Now, since we're talking about triple Ps, I think it's also important to look at social infrastructure projects. Again, very strong plans taking place. Katouria, which is in charge of the schools, they've released bids last year. Plans are to do so again this year. 120 schools under a triple P program, 1,600 kindergartens. Ministry of Housing are looking at over 100,000 housing units. Ministry of Health recently released a triple P hospital, 240 beds. So really, again, not just in utility, but also social infrastructure projects, we are seeing good, healthy growth. I cannot say the same for LSTK and EPC projects. We have seen delays in those, and again, these are mainly because these are projects that are funded by the client himself or the public sector. However, projects under the PPP framework where the investments are coming in from the private sector, these are moving very well, very strong forward. Now, a good idea to look at what we can expect, because I really do believe that this is simply the beginning of the PPP project movement or strategy taking place in the kingdom. I think these are the basic type of PPP programs. We can expect to see far more complex programs, and this is what I'm sharing, what I'd like to share with you today, on what's happening on a global scale. So if we, and these are projects that ENGIE has worked on, again, in various countries across the world. So if we look at, for example, very quickly, linkage. Making sure this was a PPP program, but the PPP program was designed to improve the economic and social environment of that particular city. Now here, the PPP program was based on FDIs, bringing in 170 million pounds of foreign direct investments, creating jobs and target savings. Again, social infrastructure, but mark a far wider concept of a PPP program. As well as, it's important to note here that the remuneration or the pay done on this particular project, 30% of it, 30% of that remuneration was based on meeting those targets, based on achieving those FDIs, based on achieving that job creation and that savings. Ohio State University, this was taking over the entire energy requirements of the university. There was a $1 billion upfront payment made to the university, and then providing them with their energy services at a lower cost, as well as achieving energy efficiency targets. Singapore, wide area network coverage, 99% of the island, we've done within 6 months, PPP program, and the subscription rates are as low as 73 cents per year. So very low. The objective here for Singapore was really to create the necessary foundation work for IoTs. Marseille, similar concept, 40%. It was a urban heating and cooling for the city. Commercial risk was taken here, providing lower cost electricity and water needs to the residents at a commercial risk rate. Forte, it was a waterway network for parks and ensuring that it's more accommodating to the residents in that waterway. Rio de Janeiro, we're looking at cameras, CCTV keys for security. Again, what I'm trying to share here is really the wide area of projects that can be taken into consideration when looking at PPP networks. So I strongly believe that we can expect to see this taking place in the kingdom in the future as well. Far more complex programs than what is happening today. Now, one important thing to mention is, okay, what is the success factor? What are key items that we need to look at a high level when it comes to PPP programs? The whole objective of a PPP program is really to transfer the capital and transfer the risk to the private sector, as opposed to it being handled by the public sector in the past, where they fund projects and then it's turned over to the public sector. No, reality here on the PPP programs, the idea is for the private sector to invest and take on more of the risk. So one important success factor to take into consideration is the time in years. The longer the contract, the more the involvement is of the private sector. So if we're looking at simple PPC programs, LSTK projects, that's roughly 3 years. When you get more operation and maintenance involved, design building, food projects, more years need to be considered for the private sector to be able to remunerate its cost, as well as ensure that they're providing a low-cost solution. So if we're looking at, if I use an example here, as utility projects, in many cases are 20 to 25 years. These are hundreds of millions of dollars. So therefore, to ensure that low cost is provided to the client, several years need to be taking place. Again, more complex the project, the longer the time frame. The Ohio State example I shared with you earlier, that was a 50-year concession agreement. So longer amount of time for more risk transfer to the private sector. Another, I think, important factor to take into place is, again, the type of involvement, whether with respect to the contract, with respect to the regulation, with respect to the public fund. So if we're looking at simple form contracts, there's really limited involvement or supervision, let's say, from the public sector, limited regulations. However, as we start to increase the degree of involvement of the private sector and the amount of years and amount of risk as well, the more regulations are required. And as a result, with the proper regulations in place, there'll be minimal involvement of the public sector. So I think this is something important to note, that as we start to see more complex involvement from the more complex PPP programs, more risk taking from the private sector, the more regulations that will be required to ensure that foreign direct investment interests are protected. And the other item I'd like to share with you with success factors, and this is the last item on success factors, is really the type of risk involved. So the more years that is taking place in a PPP contract, there needs to be a fair balance between how much risk is taken by the public authority and how much is taken by the private authority. Too much on either side will result in a non-successful contract, let's say, or a non-successful PPP program. If too much risk is expected on the private sector, the contract will not work. If there's too much risk taken on the public sector, again, the contract will not work. So it needs to be a fair balance in terms of how we put these PPP programs together. And what I would also like to share is what are these challenges that we can expect to see. So today, we're moving from simple utility PPP programs. We're adding a little bit more complex social projects under PPP framework with respect to schools, university, housing, hospitals. However, as we start to move forward, I think we're going to see far more complex areas, and this is where you can look at the various different types of directions that the country, not just Saudi Arabia, but various countries across the world are looking at. Circular economy, smart cities, IoTs, the example of Singapore here, the health of citizens. So therefore, all these key KPIs, let's say, or all these key targets and objectives required by different countries or different clients as we move forward will need to be incorporated into these PPP programs. If we're looking at longer term PPP programs, then we need to ensure that the private sector is also taking a share of that risk and ensuring that these targets and objectives are met. Finally, as a summary, what I would simply like to share in terms of what we need to ensure successful PPP programs moving forward. Ideally, since the risk is being transferred to the private sector, there needs to be a strong relationship built between both the public and private sector to ensure successful projects are developed and designed in the right fashion. Transparent and clear evaluation criteria, this is really key. We understand that there's always competition taking place. However, we always want to ensure that we understand why, in the event we have not run a project, the reason behind it, and how we can improve our business moving forward. Balance risk sharing, as I mentioned earlier, and obviously access to project debt, because it's not just a project that we're performing, but we want to ensure the success of the overall objectives of the client are also being met. And that is my last slide. Thank you very much for your listening, and I hope this information was useful.